The first thing Patricia Crawford noticed when she scanned the manifest that morning was seat 2A, first class, full fare, passenger name Bennett, Dr. James. Nothing unusual about that. The second thing she noticed, scrolling down, was seat 2B, Bennett, Zara, age 9, a child, in first class, on her flight. Patricia had worked for Skybridge Airlines for 23 years, long enough to develop what she called instincts about passengers, long enough to know that certain people didn't belong in certain spaces, no matter what their boarding pass claimed. She learned to trust those instincts, even when supervisors cautioned her about profiling. They didn't understand. You had to maintain standards. You had to protect the experience for the passengers who truly deserved it. She pressed her lips into a thin line and made a mental note to keep an eye on 2A and 2B. The Atlanta morning pressed humid and heavy against the terminal windows as travelers shuffled through security checkpoints, dragging roller bags and juggling coffee cups. Gate C-17 hummed with the particular tension of a 7:15 a.m. departure. Business travelers tapping laptops, families wrangling overtired children, the occasional nervous flyer gripping armrests before even boarding. Patricia smoothed her navy blue uniform skirt and adjusted her name tag. 23 years of service deserved respect. 23 years of maintaining cabin standards, of ensuring first-class passengers received the dignity their ticket price commanded. She took pride in that. Her supervisors might push diversity training and sensitivity workshops, but Patricia knew the truth. Excellence required gatekeeping. Not everyone belonged everywhere. The gate agent's voice crackled over the speaker, announcing pre-boarding for passengers requiring assistance. Patricia gathered her crew near the jet bridge entrance. Rachel Anderson, the junior flight attendant, fidgeted with her hair, still nervous after only 6 months on the job. Jessica, their usual third, had called in sick at the last minute, leaving them short-staffed. Typical. Rachel's youth showed in everything. The eager smile, the careful attention to the service manual, the way she actually seemed to believe the company line about treating every passenger with dignity regardless of appearance or background. She'd learn. Give her a few years, and she'd understand that policy and reality existed in different universes. The jet bridge doors opened, and early boarders began trickling through. Patricia positioned herself at the aircraft entrance, her practiced smile ready. First class first, of course. A silver-haired executive in a Brooks Brothers suit, a woman in designer heels carrying a Hermes bag, a couple who looked like they summered in the Hamptons. Patricia's smile warmed genuinely for each of them. Then she saw them. A tall black man in his early 40s moved slowly down the jet bridge, one hand trailing along the wall, the other gripping a white cane. Dark sunglasses obscured his eyes. His clothing looked expensive if you knew what to look for. The fabric had that subtle weight of quality, but he wore it like camouflage. A simple navy hoodie, dark jeans, comfortable sneakers. Nothing flashy, nothing that announced wealth or status. Beside him walked a little girl, maybe 9 years old, with her hair pulled back in neat braids, tied with blue ribbons. She carried a small backpack covered in patches, a shooting star, a book, a tiny airplane. Her other hand rested gently on her father's elbow, guiding him with a careful attention that suggested long practice. Patricia's professional smile flickered. Her mental checklist activated automatically. First-class tickets, questionable. Traveling alone, red flag. Child that young, potential disruption. She'd seen this before. People who somehow got upgraded or used points they shouldn't have had, then acted entitled when questioned. People who didn't understand that first class came with expectations, standards. The man reached the aircraft entrance and paused, orienting himself to the new space. Patricia stepped forward, her voice carrying just enough authority to establish hierarchy. "Excuse me, this is first class." The little girl looked up, her dark eyes serious and intelligent. She spoke with the careful articulation of a child used to being heard. "Yes, ma'am. Seats 2A and 2B. My father and I." Patricia's jaw tightened. The girl's confidence irritated her more than it should have. 9 years old and already acting like she owned the place. She glanced at the boarding passes the child extended. Legitimate, unfortunately. Premium economy prices. Paid in full 3 weeks ago. "Let me verify those." She took the passes, studying them with deliberate slowness. The manifest didn't lie, but sometimes there were mistakes. System glitches. Fraudulent bookings. She pulled out her tablet, scanning through the passenger list with exaggerated care. The seconds stretched. Other passengers began backing up behind the Bennetts, briefcases bumping against legs, irritated sighs building. Rachel appeared at Patricia's elbow, her young face uncertain. "Patricia, is everything okay? The line is, 'I'm handling it.'" The tablet confirmed what the boarding passes already showed. Dr. James Bennett, seat 2A. Zara Bennett, seat 2B. Legitimate, paid, no flags. Patricia handed back the passes with a coolness that bordered on contempt. "Welcome aboard." She stepped aside barely enough for them to pass, making the man with the cane navigate carefully through the narrow space. The little girl guided her father with a gentle pressure on his elbow, her small body radiating a protective awareness that seemed far too old for 9. They moved down the aisle toward the front of the cabin. Patricia watched, arms crossed. The girl helped her father into 2A, the window seat, then stowed his cane in the overhead compartment with practiced efficiency. She knew exactly where to place it for easy retrieval. This wasn't their first flight. That realization bothered Patricia more than she wanted to examine. She turned back to greeting passengers, her smile brightening considerably for an elderly white couple, dimming again when a young Latino man in business casual approached. The patterns ran deep, unconscious, automatic. 23 years of instincts. Rachel moved through the cabin doing the initial check, offering newspapers and headphones. Patricia heard her stop at row 2, her voice warm and genuine. "Dr. Bennett, can I bring you anything? Water, coffee?" The man's voice came soft and courteous. "Water would be wonderful, thank you. And perhaps some orange juice for my daughter?" Rachel promised to return shortly. Patricia rolled her eyes. The junior attendant didn't understand efficiency. You couldn't coddle every passenger, or you'd spend the whole flight running errands. Some people needed more attention than others, and the Bennetts didn't strike her as the type who warranted extra service. Boarding continued. More first-class passengers filed through. Patricia's kind of passengers. People who looked like they belonged. A pilot in uniform deadheading back to Baltimore. A surgeon reviewing medical journals. A lawyer with monogrammed luggage. And then Victoria Hayes appeared in the jet bridge entrance like a force of nature. Victoria wore money the way some women wore perfume. Heavily, obviously, intentionally. Her St. John suit probably cost more than Patricia made in a month. Diamond studs caught the overhead lights. Her highlighted hair sat in that precise style that required weekly salon maintenance. She dragged a Louis Vuitton roller bag that absolutely would not fit in the overhead compartment, but she'd insist on trying anyway. She always did. Patricia had flown with Victoria Hayes 17 times in the past 5 years. The woman flew this route religiously, Atlanta to Baltimore and back, visiting her daughter and grandchildren once a month. She always booked 2A, always. Skybridge's system didn't guarantee specific seat assignments. First class was first class. But Victoria had made it clear through multiple complaints to management that 2A was her seat. She'd written letters, made phone calls, threatened to switch airlines. Corporate had quietly instructed gate agents and flight attendants to accommodate her when possible. Victoria's sharp eyes scanned the first-class cabin, landing immediately on row 2. Her perfectly painted lips pressed into a hard line. Patricia's stomach dropped. She'd been so focused on processing the Bennetts' suspicious booking that she hadn't thought about seat assignments, hadn't checked to see if Victoria was on today's manifest, hadn't done the mental math that should have been automatic after 23 years. Victoria's heels clicked against the aircraft floor as she marched toward row 2. Patricia moved to intercept, but Victoria was faster, decades of entitlement propelling her forward. "Excuse me, that's my seat." The little girl looked up from where she'd been describing something outside the window to her father. Her expression remained polite but firm. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but these are our assigned seats, 2A and 2B. Victoria's voice rose half an octave, designed to carry through the cabin. "I always sit in 2A. There's been a mistake." Patricia reached them, her mind racing through options. The Bennetts had legitimate tickets, but Victoria was a valued customer, a complainer. The kind of passenger who could make Patricia's life miserable with a single phone call to corporate. And the Bennetts, well, they were just ordinary passengers. They'd understand. People like them always understood when they needed to make accommodations for more important travelers. She made her decision. "Young lady, I'm sure you and your father wouldn't mind moving to different seats? We have some lovely options in economy." The girl's eyes widened slightly, but her voice remained level. "We paid full price for first class, ma'am." Patricia felt her professional mask slip, frustration bleeding through. "It's just a seat. Mrs. Hayes is our valued platinum member. She has medical needs that require— My father has medical needs too." The simple statement, delivered in that calm 9-year-old voice, cut through Patricia's rehearsed explanations. She glanced at the man in 2A, really looked at him for the first time. The dark glasses, the careful way he held his head, orienting by sound rather than sight. The healing scar visible along his temple, disappearing into his hairline. Blind. The man was blind. Something flickered in Patricia's chest, maybe conscience, maybe just awareness that this looked bad. A blind man and his young daughter versus a wealthy woman who wanted her favorite seat. The optics were terrible. But Victoria Hayes wrote letters. Victoria Hayes complained to supervisors. Victoria Hayes had corporate's private number. The Bennetts were nobodies. Patricia made a choice that she'd spend the next 3 months regretting. "Sir, perhaps you'd be more comfortable in our Economy Plus section? We have a lovely row with extra legroom." The blind man's hand found his daughter's, squeezed gently. His voice remained quiet, almost apologetic. "We'd prefer to stay in our assigned seats. Thank you." Victoria huffed, her diamond bracelet flashing as she gestured dramatically. "This is ridiculous. Patricia, I don't pay premium prices to be treated like this. That's my seat. I've sat there for 5 years. Across the aisle, a black man in a pilot's uniform set down his tablet, his eyes sharp and assessing. Marcus Williams had flown for Delta for 12 years. He knew discrimination when he saw it. More importantly, he knew how to document it. His phone came out of his pocket, camera app already open, angled carefully to capture row 2 without being obvious. Rachel Anderson appeared from the galley, her face flushed with the particular embarrassment of witnessing something wrong but not knowing how to stop it. She'd been taught in training to treat every passenger with respect. She'd been told that Skybridge valued diversity and inclusion. But she'd also been taught to defer to senior flight attendants, to trust their experience, to not make waves during her probationary period. She chose silence and hated herself for it. Victoria's voice climbed another notch, playing to the growing audience.
"I have a heart condition. I need the window seat for my medication routine. This is a medical necessity."
The little girl spoke with devastating clarity. "What's your condition, ma'am?" Victoria sputtered, caught off guard by the directness.
"That's none of your business, young lady. If it's a medical necessity, the flight attendants should have documentation."
"Do you have a doctor's note?" 9 years old, and she'd just called Victoria's bluff with the precision of a trial lawyer. Patricia felt control of the situation slipping through her fingers like water. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The Bennets were supposed to comply quietly, the way people like them always did when confronted by authority. They were supposed to accept their place. Captain Roger Daniels emerged from the cockpit, drawn by the commotion. At 62, he'd flown for Skybridge for 34 years, accumulating seniority, authority, and a deep-seated belief that his aircraft was his kingdom. He stood 6 feet tall, with silver hair, and the kind of command presence that filled the space before he spoke. "What's the problem here, Patricia?" She turned to him gratefully, relieved to pass this mess to someone with more authority. "Captain, we have a situation with seat assignments." "Mrs. Hayes, our platinum member with medical needs, usually sits in 2A, but these passengers—" She gestured vaguely at the Bennets, letting the captain's eyes do the assessment she didn't need to verbalize. He'd see what she saw. He'd understand. And he did. His gaze moved from the blind black man in the expensive but casual hoodie to the too confident little girl to the white woman in designer clothing practically vibrating with indignation. The math was simple in his mind. Squeaky wheel gets the grease. Valued customer gets the seat. Everyone else gets in line. Folks, let's not make this difficult. Sir, we'd be happy to accommodate you and your daughter in economy. Rachel will help you move your things. The blind man's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His daughter's hand found his again. "Captain, we have confirmed seat assignments. We paid full fare. We're not moving." Her voice didn't rise, didn't waver. 9 years old, and she stood her ground with a quiet dignity that should have shamed every adult in that first-class cabin. Should have. Didn't. Captain Daniels' voice hardened, the friendly offer evaporating into command. "Young lady, on my aircraft, I make the decisions about passenger placement. Your father can stay if he cooperates, but I need you to—" She interrupted him. A 9-year-old child interrupted a captain with 34 years of authority. "We're staying in our seats." The cabin had gone completely silent. 28 passengers in first class, every single one watching. Marcus Williams' phone captured everything. An elderly couple in row 3 exchanged uncomfortable glances. The surgeon in row 4 pretended to focus on her medical journal, but missed 3 lines reading the same sentence. Victoria Hayes sensed victory and pressed her advantage. "Captain, I've been flying Skybridge for 15 years. I shouldn't have to argue about this. Those people clearly don't understand proper first-class etiquette." Those people. The words hung in the air like smoke, not quite explicitly racist, but carrying enough implication that everyone heard the subtext. Those people who don't belong here. Those people who should know their place. Those people who should be grateful we let them on the plane at all. The blind man's hand trembled slightly on the armrest. His daughter noticed and covered it with her own small hand. Rachel Anderson felt her stomach twist. She'd joined Skybridge because she believed in service, in hospitality, in treating every human being with dignity. She'd chosen this career because she loved the idea of helping people, of making their journeys easier. But standing there, watching this play out, she understood with sick clarity that she was complicit. Her silence was agreement. Her inaction was support. She opened her mouth to say something. She wasn't sure what, just something. But Patricia shot her a warning glare that promised career consequences if she interfered. Rachel closed her mouth and filed the moment away as the first crack in her faith that doing the right thing was always possible in institutional spaces. Captain Daniels pulled out his phone, his meaning clear. One call to the gate, and security could resolve this situation in minutes. The blind man and his daughter would be removed. Victoria would get her seat. The flight would depart on schedule. Everything would return to normal. His thumb hovered over the contact for ground security. The little girl looked up at him, and something in her eyes made him pause. Not fear, not even anger, just a steady assessment, as if she were cataloging his choices for future reference, as if she were memorizing this moment for purposes he couldn't begin to imagine. His thumb moved toward the call button, A soft voice stopped him. The blind man, speaking for only the second time since boarding. "Captain, I'm traveling to Johns Hopkins for critical surgery. My daughter is ensuring I arrive safely. We purchased these seats specifically because the window position helps with my orientation and reduces anxiety from my condition. I'd appreciate it if you'd allow us to remain where we've been assigned." The explanation was calm, reasonable, medical, impossible to dismiss without looking like a monster. Captain Daniels lowered his phone, recalculated, decided that fighting a blind man over a seat assignment wasn't the hill he wanted to die on this Tuesday morning. "Fine, but I expect no further disruptions from either of you." He said it like a concession, like he was being generous, like they should be grateful for his permission to occupy the seats they'd paid for. Victoria Hayes made a sound of disgust and threw her carry-on into the overhead compartment hard enough that something inside cracked. She dropped into seat 3A across the aisle, radiating fury. Patricia promised her upgraded meal service and extra champagne. Rachel brought her a pillow without being asked, trying to minimize the tantrum they all knew was building. The Bennetts sat quietly in 2A and 2B. The little girl pulled out a tablet and began reading to her father in a soft voice, something about quantum mechanics that seemed far too advanced for a 9-year-old, but held his complete attention. Marcus Williams reviewed the video on his phone. Crystal clear. Every word captured, every face visible. He tagged it with a timestamp and location, but didn't post it. Not yet. He'd learned in 12 years of flying while black that documentation mattered, but timing mattered more. You waited to see if the situation escalated before you pulled the trigger on social media. He had a feeling this situation was going to escalate. The flight pushed back from the gate 17 minutes late due to the extended boarding drama. Captain Daniels made a smooth announcement about weather and flight time, his voice carrying none of the tension from 10 minutes earlier. Patricia worked the first-class cabin with exaggerated attention to the white passengers, making sure everyone except the Bennetts felt valued and important. Rachel brought the blind man his water and orange juice for his daughter. She wanted to apologize, wanted to say something that acknowledged the injustice of what had just happened, but the words wouldn't come. Her 6 months of employment felt like a cage. Her student loans felt like chains. Her dreams of making a difference felt like naive fantasies. She served beverages and hated herself. The flight reached cruising altitude. Seatbelt signs dinged off. Patricia began preparing for meal service, reviewing the first-class manifest. Dr. Bennett had requested a vegetarian option due to medication interactions. She noted it with irritation. Special requests always complicated service. The girl helped her father recline his seat, describing the clouds outside the window in precise detail. Cumulus formations at 11,000 feet. The curve of the Earth visible at the horizon. The wing cutting through air with mathematical grace. She talked about physics, and her father listened with the attention of someone who couldn't see, but could imagine with perfect clarity. Patricia caught fragments of their conversation as she worked. "Daddy, do you think the surgery will work?" The man's hand found his daughter's cheek with the careful touch of someone navigating by memory. "Dr. Morgan thinks we have a good chance. But even if it doesn't, we'll be okay. We've been okay so far. I want you to see again. I want you to see what I see. Baby, you've been my eyes for 3 years. You've shown me things I never would have noticed when I could see. You've taught me to pay attention differently." The girl was quiet for a moment, then her voice came smaller. "Sometimes I'm scared." "Of what?" "That if you can see again, you won't need me anymore." The man's laugh was soft and full of love. "Zara, I will always need you. Sight doesn't change that. You're not just my eyes. You're my courage." Patricia turned away from the tender moment, irritated by the eavesdropping and the unwelcome softening in her chest. She didn't want to humanize them. Didn't want to acknowledge that they were people with fears and hopes, and a relationship built on years of adaptation to tragedy. It was easier to see them as problems, as disruptions, as people who didn't belong in first class on her flight. She gathered the meal carts and began service. Rachel helped, serving from the back while Patricia worked the premium rows. They perfected the choreography over dozens of flights. Patricia took the front, the important passengers, the ones who tipped and wrote compliments. Rachel got everyone else. Victoria Hayes received her meal first, served with profuse apologies about the seating situation and promises that Patricia would personally speak to management about reservation protocols. Victoria accepted the groveling as her due and ordered a second glass of champagne. Row by row, Patricia worked backward: the surgeon, the lawyer, the businessman. Each received their meal with a smile, a personal comment, the kind of attentive service that made first class feel worth the premium price. She reached row 2 last. Dr. Bennett's vegetarian option sat on her cart, and Patricia noticed immediately that something was off. The vegetables looked wilted, darker than they should be. The sauce had separated. A faint sour smell rose from the container. She'd worked enough lights to recognize spoiled food. Should have been caught in the prep kitchen. Should have been flagged by the catering supervisor. Should have been replaced before it ever made it onto her cart. Should have been. Wasn't. Patricia made a choice in that moment. Later, she'd try to convince herself it was accident, oversight, the chaos of a short-staffed flight. But in the moment, in the deep places she didn't examine, she made a choice. She served the spoiled meal to the blind man who couldn't see what he was eating. The little girl was in the bathroom, washing her hands before eating. The man sat alone, waiting. Patricia placed the tray on his seat-back table with less care than she'd shown the other passengers. The vegetables sloshed, the sauce dripped onto the tray liner. "Here's your vegetarian meal, sir." She walked away before he could respond, before she had to look at what she'd just done, before conscience could catch up with action. Rachel caught her in the galley, her young face troubled. "Patricia, that meal looked off. Did you check the—" "It's fine. Stop questioning everything and just do your job." Rachel fell silent, but her expression said she'd file this away too. Another moment catalogued. Another crack in her foundation. The little girl returned from the bathroom and slid into seat 2B. She picked up her own meal, a child's portion with fresh fruit and crackers, and started to open it. Then she paused, her nose wrinkling slightly. She leaned toward her father's tray, sniffed. Her expression shifted from curiosity to alarm in seconds. "Daddy, don't eat that!" The man's hand hovered over the fork, confused by the urgency in his daughter's voice. "What's wrong, baby?" "The food smells bad. Really bad. Sour." She lifted the container closer, examining the discolored vegetables, the separated sauce. Then she set it down with careful precision and pressed the call button. Patricia saw the light illuminate on her service panel and sighed. Of course. Of course they'd complain about the meal. People like them always found something to complain about. She walked to row 2, her professional smile strained. "Is there a problem?" The girl's voice was polite but firm. "This food is spoiled. We need a replacement." Patricia glanced at the tray with theatrical skepticism, not even bothering to bend down and examine it properly. "The food is fine. We prepare all meals according to strict safety guidelines." "Ma'am, I can smell that it's gone bad. My father is on immunosuppressants for his surgery. Eating spoiled food could make him seriously ill." The medical detail was specific, credible, delivered with the confidence of a child who'd been managing her father's health care for 3 years. But Patricia had committed to her narrative now. Admitting the food was spoiled meant admitting she'd served it anyway, meant accepting responsibility, meant facing questions about why she hadn't checked. "Perhaps you're just not used to airline vegetarian options. They can have a strong aroma." The girl's eyes widened slightly. Around them, other passengers began turning, sensing conflict. "I'm not talking about aroma. I'm talking about spoiled food." Please, just smell it yourself. Patricia felt her temper rising. This child, this 9-year-old, was challenging her authority, questioning her judgment, making her look incompetent in front of the entire cabin. 23 years of service, and she was being lectured by someone who probably still needed help cutting her own meat. The blind man tried to intervene, his voice gentle and apologetic, in a way that made Patricia even angrier, because it reminded her that she should be apologetic. "Ma'am, if you could just check the meal? My daughter has a very good sense of these things." "I don't need a lecture from you about food safety, sir." The words came out harder than she'd intended. Across the aisle, Victoria Hayes perked up, scenting drama. Marcus Williams' hand moved to his phone again. Rachel gripped the galley counter until her knuckles went white. Patricia leaned down, made a show of sniffing the meal for half a second. "It smells like vegetarian pasta to me. Maybe you're not familiar with this type of cuisine." The implication hung heavy and obvious. Maybe you people aren't used to quality food. Maybe you don't know what fine dining is supposed to taste like. Maybe you're just too unsophisticated to recognize excellence when you taste it. The little girl's expression shifted. Something hardened behind her eyes, something older than 9, something forged in 3 years of protecting a disabled parent in a world that didn't make space for them. "Are you suggesting that Black people don't understand food quality?" The question cut through every polite euphemism, every coded phrase, every careful dance around the truth of what was happening. She'd named it, made it explicit, forced everyone in that cabin to acknowledge what they'd been pretending not to see. Patricia's face flushed. "I didn't say anything about... You said we might not be familiar with this cuisine. You're implying that because we're Black, we don't recognize fine food? That's a racist assumption, ma'am." 9 years old, and she just delivered a more articulate accusation of discrimination than most adults could manage. Marcus Williams' video captured every word. The surgeon in row 4 set down her journal completely. The elderly couple in row 3 looked horrified. Even Victoria Hayes seemed taken aback by the child's directness. Rachel pushed off from the galley counter and moved forward, finally finding her voice. "Patricia, maybe we should just get a fresh meal. I can..." Patricia whirled on her. "I've got this, Rachel. Go check on the economy cabin." "But now." Rachel retreated, her face burning with shame. She'd failed again. Failed the child. Failed herself. Failed every principle she'd thought she stood for. The little girl hadn't moved. Her hand rested on her father's shoulder, protective and determined. "My father needs a safe meal. That food is spoiled. I'm asking you politely one more time to replace it." Patricia's professional restraint, already frayed by stress and resentment and the uncomfortable awareness that she was wrong, finally snapped completely. "Look, I understand that some people have different standards about food, but this meal was prepared in the certified kitchen, just like everyone else's. If you don't want to eat it, fine, don't eat it. But I'm not bringing you something special just because you think you deserve better than what we provided." The blind man's hand found his daughter's, squeezed tight. His voice came quiet and resigned. "We'll just skip the meal. It's fine. I don't want any trouble." And there it was, the capitulation Patricia had been waiting for. The acceptance, the acknowledgement of place and position and power dynamics. People like them learning to back down when people like her pushed back. Except the little girl didn't back down. She stood up in the aisle, all 4 feet of her, and looked Patricia directly in the eyes. "Did you serve my father spoiled food because he's blind?" The accusation landed like a bomb. Every conversation in first class stopped. Every head turned. Marcus Williams' livestream viewer count jumped from 200 to 2,000 in 30 seconds. Patricia felt the cabin closing in on her, felt the weight of dozens of stares, felt the phone cameras pointed in her direction like weapons. "Of course not. Don't be ridiculous." "Then why did you serve him food that smells rotten? Why did you refuse to check it properly?" Why did you suggest we're not used to quality food? The questions came precise and relentless. The child was building a case, piece by piece, forcing Patricia to defend choices she couldn't explain without admitting prejudice. Victoria Hayes, sensing an opportunity to redirect negative attention away from her earlier behavior, spoke up from across the aisle. For heaven's sake, the food looks fine to me. Stop being so dramatic and difficult. The little girl turned to Victoria with devastating calm. Ma'am, you're sitting 6 feet away. You can't smell it from there, and you're not a medical professional. My father's surgeon specifically warned him about food safety during his preoperative protocol. But thank you for your input. Victoria sputtered. Marcus Williams coughed to cover a laugh. The surgeon in row 4 nodded approvingly at the child's command of medical terminology. Patricia felt control spiraling away completely. She'd lost the narrative, lost the moral high ground, lost any claim to professional competence. A 9-year-old had outmaneuvered her in front of 30 witnesses and counting live stream viewers. Desperation made her cruel. Maybe you people are just more demanding than our regular passengers. Maybe you should have flown economy if you can't appreciate first-class service without constant complaints. The words escaped before she could stop them, before she could calculate the cost, before she could recognize the cliff she'd just stepped off. You people. The same phrase Victoria had used during boarding, the same coded language that every black person in America recognized immediately. The same dog whistle that had echoed through centuries of American discrimination. The little girl didn't flinch, didn't shout, didn't cry. She simply said, in a voice that carried to every corner of the cabin, "You will respect black people." Patricia's laugh came harsh and defensive. Or else what? The child reached into her pocket and pulled out an iPhone. Not a child's toy, but a real device, latest model, expensive. Her fingers moved across the screen with practiced speed, typing a message with the fluency of someone who'd learned tech skills before learning cursive. You're fired, and no airline will ever hire you again. The cabin erupted, not with sound, but with the sudden collective intake of breath that happens when people witness something unprecedented. Patricia's laugh turned genuine, born from relief and disbelief, and the certain knowledge that this child had finally revealed herself as exactly what Patricia had suspected all along, a spoiled brat playing pretend games. Sweetie, you can't fire me. This isn't a Disney movie. This is the real world. The little girl finished typing and looked up, her expression perfectly calm. I've sent a message to the appropriate people. You'll be hearing from them shortly. Patricia turned to Victoria, to the other passengers, looking for validation, for shared amusement at this child's delusion. Can you believe this? These entitled passengers thinking they run the airline. But nobody was laughing. Marcus Williams was still recording, his face serious. The surgeon looked troubled. Even Victoria seemed uncomfortable with how far this had escalated. And 3 rows back, a man who'd been sleeping through the entire confrontation woke to voices raised in his familiar cabin. Owen Mitchell stretched, pulled off his sleep mask, and caught the tail end of a 9-year-old girl threatening to fire Patricia Crawford. Owen Mitchell, senior supervisor for Skybridge Airlines' southeastern routes, who'd been deadheading back to Atlanta after resolving a staffing crisis in Baltimore. Owen Mitchell, who'd attended a conference call 3 years ago where a little girl's voice had interrupted to ask surprisingly sophisticated questions about hub logistics. Owen Mitchell, whose blood now ran cold as certain puzzle pieces began clicking into place. He pulled out his phone with hands that had started to shake and typed 3 words into the search bar. James Bennett Aviation. The results loaded slowly on the aircraft Wi-Fi. First, a Forbes article from 3 years ago, then Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, Aviation Week. Photos showed a tall black man in an expensive suit standing beside a sleek regional jet. Headlines spoke of tragedy and triumph, of a pilot killed in an accident, and his wife who'd built an empire in his memory. of Bennett Regional Airlines growing into Bennett Aviation Holdings, of partnerships and acquisitions and a network that spanned the Southeast, of a controlling stake in 7 regional carriers, including the one that partnered with Skybridge for 60% of their hub operations. Owen's phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. He answered with a voice that didn't sound like his own. "This is Owen Mitchell." "Mr. Mitchell, this is Sarah Reynolds, Executive Assistant to the Board of Directors at Bennett Aviation Holdings. We've received a report of discriminatory treatment of Dr. James Bennett and his daughter Zara on Skybridge Flight 1247. The board has asked me to inform you that this matter is considered of highest priority." Owen looked toward row 2, where a blind man sat with his 9-year-old daughter, where Patricia Crawford continued serving passengers, oblivious to the destruction about to rain down on her career, where a little girl had just fired a flight attendant and meant every word. Sarah Reynolds' voice carried the particular chill of someone delivering consequences from a position of absolute authority. "Mr. Mitchell? Dr. Bennett is traveling to Johns Hopkins for corneal restoration surgery that has already been postponed for 3 years following the accident that took his wife's life. Any additional stress or delay could jeopardize his only opportunity to regain his sight. The board views this incident as a direct threat to Dr. Bennett's medical outcome and well-being." Owen's mouth had gone dry. He stared at the back of James Bennett's head 3 rows forward, at the careful way the man held himself, at the protective posture of his daughter beside him. "What do you need me to do?" "For now, ensure Dr. Bennett and his daughter receive appropriate care for the remainder of the flight. Remove the offending employee from any further contact with our passengers. The board will conduct a full investigation upon landing. They will also be reviewing all partnership agreements with Skybridge Airlines." The last sentence hit like a physical blow. Partnership agreements. The words that kept Owen awake at night, that filled spreadsheets and quarterly reports, that represented the difference between Skybridge's survival and bankruptcy. Bennett Aviation Holdings didn't just partner with them. They were the cornerstone of Skybridge's entire southeastern hub strategy. Without Bennett's network, Skybridge lost access to 43 regional routes, lost connecting passengers, lost the economies of scale that made their Atlanta hub profitable, lost everything. Owen had worked for Skybridge for 19 years. He'd survived 3 recessions, 2 mergers, and countless restructurings. He knew airline economics the way a sailor knows tides. And he knew with absolute certainty that losing Bennett Aviation Holdings would sink them within 6 months. 2,000 jobs gone, including his. All because Patricia Crawford couldn't serve a meal without being racist. "I understand, Miss Reynolds. I'll handle this immediately. The board expects a preliminary report within 2 hours of landing. They've already retained counsel." The line went dead. Owen sat motionless for 10 seconds, processing the magnitude of what had just happened. Then his supervisor instincts kicked in, and he stood, moving forward through the cabin with the careful neutrality of someone approaching a live explosive. Patricia was in the galley, preparing coffee service, completely unaware that her career had ended 3 minutes ago. Rachel stood nearby, her face pale, clearly knowing something had gone catastrophically wrong, but not understanding the full scope. Owen stopped at the galley entrance. His voice came quiet. "Patricia, I need to speak with you immediately." She glanced up, irritated by the interruption. "I'm in the middle of service. Can it wait?" "No." Something in his tone finally penetrated. She set down the coffee pot and followed him to the rear galley, away from passenger ears. Rachel trailed behind, sensing she needed to hear this. Owen kept his voice low and precise. "Do you know who the man in seat 2A is?" Patricia's expression flickered with the first hint of unease. "Some passenger who wouldn't follow instructions. That's Dr. James Bennett. He founded Bennett Regional Airlines 20 years ago after his career as a commercial pilot. 8 years ago, he married Dylan Bennett, a pilot who pioneered new safety protocols that are now industry standard. 3 years ago, Dylan died in an aircraft accident that also left Dr. Bennett with severe injuries. He lost his sight gradually over the following year. Patricia's face had started to lose color, but Owen wasn't finished. Dr. Bennett stepped down as CEO, but retained controlling ownership. Bennett Regional Airlines became Bennett Aviation Holdings through a series of strategic acquisitions. They now own or control 7 regional carriers across the Southeast, including the carrier that Skybridge partners with for 60% of our Atlanta hub operations. The coffee pot in Rachel's hand began to shake. She set it down carefully. You just racially discriminated against, served spoiled food to, and publicly humiliated the man who effectively controls whether this airline continues to exist. Patricia grabbed the counter for support. But he never said anything. He was just sitting there in a hoodie looking like... Owen's voice went cold. Looking like what, Patricia? Looking like he didn't belong in first class? Looking like someone you could dismiss? Looking like a black man who should know his place? The explicit naming of what they'd all been dancing around made Patricia flinch. Rachel turned away, pressing her hand to her mouth. I wasn't. The words died because they were lies, and everyone knew it. Patricia had made assumptions based on race and appearance, had treated the Bennetts with contempt because she'd decided they didn't belong, had served spoiled food to a blind man because she thought she could get away with it, had destroyed herself and potentially 2,000 other jobs in the process. Owen's phone buzzed again, a text from the Skybridge corporate office. CEO wants full incident report ASAP. Board meeting called for 3 p.m. His career was probably over too. He should have been paying attention, should have intervened sooner, should have recognized the escalating situation and stepped in before it reached nuclear levels. Supervisors were supposed to supervise. What do I do? Patricia's question came small and frightened. Owen felt a flicker of pity. She was bigoted and negligent, but she was also about to lose everything because of it. Then he remembered the quiet dignity of that blind man and his 9-year-old daughter, and the pity vanished. You pray that Dr. Bennett is more forgiving than you deserve. Now go sit in the crew rest area and don't interact with any passengers for the remainder of this flight. What about service? Rachel will handle it. Rachel's head snapped up, panic in her eyes. Owen, I've only been doing this 6 months. I can't run first-class service alone. You're about to learn. Welcome to the airline industry. He left them there, Patricia heading toward crew rest with the shell-shocked expression of someone whose reality had just collapsed. Rachel hyperventilating quietly into a napkin. Owen walked back through the cabin toward row 2. Every step felt like approaching a scaffold. He'd delivered bad news to passengers before, dealt with complaints, managed difficult situations, but he'd never had to apologize to someone he'd failed so completely while simultaneously begging them not to destroy his entire company. Dr. Bennett sat with his head tilted toward the window, listening to his daughter's quiet narration of the landscape below. She was describing the Appalachian Mountains, their ridges catching morning light, the way clouds pooled in valleys like water. Owen stopped beside row 2 and cleared his throat. Dr. Bennett, my name is Owen Mitchell. I'm the senior supervisor for this route. I want to personally apologize for what happened here today. James turned his head toward Owen's voice, his expression unreadable behind dark glasses. I appreciate that, Mr. Mitchell. There is absolutely no excuse for how you and your daughter were treated. The behavior you experienced does not represent Skybridge's values or standards. The corporate language sounded hollow even to Owen's ears. Values and standards meant nothing when employees actively discriminated and supervisors slept through it. Zara looked up at him with those serious, dark eyes. What are you going to do about it? 9 years old, and cutting straight to the only question that mattered. Owen had prepared a whole speech about investigations and protocols and corrective actions. She'd dismissed it with 6 words. Your flight attendant has been removed from passenger contact for the remainder of the flight. There will be a full investigation. Appropriate disciplinary action will be taken. That sounds like corporate talk for, We'll wait until you forget about this and then do nothing. Owen blinked. Most adults couldn't deconstruct PR language that effectively. This child had just called him out with surgical precision. I assure you, this is being taken very seriously at the highest levels of our organization. Because my father owns part of your airline. If he was just a regular passenger, would it be taken seriously? The question gutted him because the answer was probably no. Patricia had done this before. Owen would bet money on it. He'd seen the pattern in her interactions, the subtle shifts in warmth based on passenger appearance. He'd noticed and dismissed it as personality quirks, as old-school service style, as harmless preferences. He'd been complicit through willful blindness. You're right. And I'm sorry for that, too. The honesty seemed to surprise her. She studied him for a moment, then nodded slightly. My father needs a proper meal. He hasn't eaten since 5 this morning because of his pre-surgical fasting requirements. He needs nutrition before his procedure tomorrow. Owen felt grateful for the concrete task, something he could actually fix immediately. I'll personally prepare a meal from our premium galley. I'll make sure it's fresh and safe. He headed back to the galley where Rachel was taking deep breaths and trying to remember her training. She looked up when he entered, her face desperate for guidance. I need you to show me what vegetarian options we have that are absolutely fresh. She moved to the storage compartments and began pulling containers. Owen inspected each one carefully, checking dates, examining appearance, smelling everything. He found a pasta primavera that looked perfect, added fresh fruit, included packaged crackers that couldn't possibly be contaminated. As he worked, Rachel spoke quietly. I knew it was wrong. The whole thing. The way Patricia treated them from the moment they boarded. I knew, and I didn't say anything. Her voice carried the weight of someone recognizing their own moral failure in real time. Owen arranged the meal on a proper tray with real silverware, not plastic. Why didn't you? Rachel's laugh came bitter. I'm still in my probationary period. I have $80,000 in student loans. My performance review is in 3 weeks. Patricia's been here 23 years, and she's best friends with the regional director. Who do you think they'd believe? Owen had no answer, because she was right. The institutional power dynamics would have crushed her. Patricia would have called her insubordinate. Management would have sided with seniority. Rachel would have been fired for speaking up. The system protected people like Patricia and punished people like Rachel. That was the quiet truth nobody in corporate wanted to acknowledge. After today, maybe that changes. Rachel helped him add a small vase with a real flower, something from the first-class amenity kit. It was a tiny gesture, but it mattered. It said, you deserve beauty. You deserve care. You deserve apology made tangible. Owen carried the tray back to row 2 himself. He placed it on Dr. Bennett's table with genuine care, described the contents and their positions on the tray in detail. Fresh pasta primavera at 3 o'clock. Fruit salad at 9 o'clock. Crackers and cheese at 6 o'clock. Everything was prepared this morning and properly refrigerated. James's hands found the tray's edges, orienting himself. His daughter leaned close, double-checking Owen's description, verifying safety. 3 years of being her father's eyes had made her methodical. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Is there anything else I can get for you? Either of you?
Zara spoke without looking away from her father.
You can make sure this doesn't happen to other people. People who don't have the power to fight back.
The statement hit harder than any complaint or threat. This child understood power dynamics better than most executives. She knew that her father's wealth and ownership protected them in a way that ordinary passengers couldn't access. She knew that Patricia probably treated other black passengers the same way, but got away with it because they couldn't destroy the airline with a phone call. She knew, and it made her angry, not for herself, but for everyone else. Owen committed in that moment to actually following through. Not just investigating Patricia, but examining the broader pattern. Looking at complaint histories, reviewing how discrimination reports were handled, actually changing the system instead of just punishing the individual. It was the least he could do. It still wouldn't be enough. He returned to his seat and opened his laptop. 2 hours until landing. 2 hours to compile a report that would probably determine whether Skybridge survived the week. He started with the video. Marcus Williams had stopped recording after 43 minutes, but that was more than enough. The footage showed everything. Victoria's entitlement, Patricia's microaggressions, Captain Daniel's bias, the spoiled food, the racist comments, a 9-year-old standing up to adult discrimination with more dignity than the adults showed. Marcus had also posted it publicly while Owen was dealing with Patricia. The view count was already at 47,000 and climbing. Comments flooded in faster than Owen could read them. This child is braver than most adults I know. That flight attendant needs to be fired immediately. I've experienced this exact same treatment on flights. This is why I stopped flying. That little girl said, "You will respect black people," and I felt that. The last comment had 12,000 likes. The phrase was already becoming a rallying cry, being shared across platforms, turned into images and graphics. Owen took screenshots of everything and added them to his report. Corporate would need to see the public relations nightmare unfolding in real time. His phone buzzed. A call from Kenneth Walsh, Skybridge's CEO. Owen answered with his heart hammering. "Mr. Walsh?" "Mitchell, what the hell is going on? I have the board chair of Bennett Aviation Holdings calling me personally. Do you understand how bad that is?" "I'm aware of the situation, sir. I'm compiling a full incident report now. Explain to me how one of our flight attendants racially discriminated against the man who controls whether we stay in business." Owen went through the timeline methodically. Boarding conflict, meal service, escalating confrontation, Patricia's comments, the child's response. Walsh listened in silence that grew heavier with each detail. When Owen finished, Walsh was quiet for a long moment. "How bad is the video?" "Bad. It's already viral. 47,000 views and rising. The comment section is calling for boycotts." Christ. Okay, here's what's going to happen. You're going to finish that report and send it to me before we land. I'm going to meet Dr. Bennett personally in Baltimore, and Patricia Crawford is fired effective immediately. Owen felt no satisfaction in hearing it. Patricia had done this to herself. He'd just been hoping the consequences might be delayed long enough for him to find a new job first. "Understood, sir." "And Mitchell? I need you to be very clear about what happened and when. If there's any suggestion that we knew about discriminatory behavior and didn't act, we're not just losing Bennett's partnership. We're facing federal discrimination lawsuits." The implication was clear. Document everything, but make sure the documentation showed this was an isolated incident, not a pattern. Make sure the company came out looking responsive rather than complicit. Owen thought about Rachel's question. Would this be taken seriously if Dr. Bennett was just a regular passenger? Thought about how many other complaints Patricia had probably generated over 23 years. Thought about the institutional incentive to minimize and dismiss rather than investigate and change. "I'll be thorough, sir." He ended the call and opened his incident database. Typed in Patricia Crawford's employee number. Pulled her complaint history. 16 formal complaints in 23 years. All from passengers of color or passengers with disabilities. All dismissed as misunderstandings or personality conflicts. All settled with apologies and small gestures, upgrades, flight credits, the occasional refund. None investigated seriously. None resulting in discipline. Because Patricia was friends with regional management. Because she had seniority. Because proving discrimination was hard and passengers usually just wanted to forget about it and move on. Because the system protected her. Owen added the complaint history to his report. Let Walsh figure out how to spin 16 previous incidents as an isolated occurrence. Forward in the cabin, Zara helped her father finish his meal. She described each component as he ate, a running commentary that was part quality control, part companionship. When he was done, she cleaned his hands with a warm towel, removed the tray, made sure he was comfortable. 9 years old and more competent than most adult caregivers Owen had seen. Rachel appeared at his seat, her service tablet in hand. "Owen, I need to ask you something." He minimized his report screen. "What is it?" "After we land, am I going to be fired too?" The question carried resignation rather than hope. She'd already accepted her fate, was just looking for confirmation. "Why would you be fired?" "I didn't stop Patricia. I saw what was happening and I stayed silent." Owen considered lying, offering false reassurance, but Rachel deserved better than that. "I don't know what corporate will decide, honestly, but I'm going to include in my report that you were placed in an impossible situation as a probationary employee, that you did express concerns which were dismissed, that you ultimately provided excellent service when given the opportunity." "It won't be enough." "Maybe not, but it's the truth." Rachel nodded and walked away to check on economy passengers. Owen watched her go and added another note to his report. "Review probationary period policies that discourage employees from reporting discrimination concerns." Another systemic issue, another way the company's structure enabled bad behavior. The flight continued through clear skies, no turbulence, perfect weather. Everything smooth except for the social and corporate wreckage scattered through the cabin. Marcus Williams put away his phone and tried to focus on work, but his mind kept returning to that little girl. The way she'd stood up without raising her voice. The way she'd named racism explicitly instead of dancing around it. The way she'd protected her father with a courage that most adults never develop. He'd flown for Delta for 12 years. He'd experienced his own share of discrimination. Passengers who didn't believe he was a pilot. Gate agents who scrutinized his credentials. Other crew members who made assumptions about his capabilities based on his skin color. He'd learned to document everything. Learned to stay calm. Learned that fighting back often meant collecting evidence and choosing battles strategically. This 9-year-old had learned all of that already. At 9. The thought made him both proud and devastated. Across the aisle, Victoria Hayes stared out her window and wondered how she'd become the villain in a viral video. She'd only wanted her usual seat. She'd been flying this route for 15 years. She had a routine. Routines mattered. But the video made her look like a monster. The comments called her racist, said she was entitled, said she'd weaponized white womanhood against a blind black man and his child. Victoria didn't think of herself as racist. She had a black housekeeper who she was very nice to. She donated to charity. She voted for Obama once. Racism was lynchings and slurs and violence, not just wanting your usual airplane seat. Except the video showed something different. Showed her assuming the Bennetts didn't belong. Showed her siding with Patricia immediately. Showed her saying those people with casual contempt. Showed her who she actually was when she thought it didn't matter. Her phone buzzed with texts from her daughter in Baltimore. "Mom, are you the woman in the airplane video? People are posting your name. They found your Facebook. The country club called. They want to talk to you." Victoria's hands trembled as she turned off her phone. This couldn't be happening. She was a good person. She volunteered. She went to church. But good people could be racist. That was the truth nobody wanted to acknowledge. Racism wasn't just hood and burning crosses. It was assumptions and biases and the casual belief that some people belonged in first class and some people didn't. It was Victoria Hayes demanding her seat from a blind man and his 9-year-old daughter because she decided they didn't matter as much as her comfort. The plane began its descent into Baltimore. Captain Daniel's voice came over the intercom, smooth and professional, announcing weather and gates and thanking passengers for flying Skybridge. He'd been flying for 34 years. He'd captained hundreds of flights without incident. He'd maintained perfect safety records. He'd been considered for chief pilot positions. And in 20 minutes of poor judgment, he'd probably destroyed all of it. He hadn't hurt anyone, hadn't been explicitly racist, had just sided with the wrong passenger based on unconscious bias, had assumed the wealthy white woman deserved the seat more than the black man in casual clothes, had made the same calculation Patricia made, Victoria made, that systems make every day. Some people matter more than others. The calculation that was about to cost him everything. Rachel worked through landing preparations with mechanical efficiency, collecting trash, securing galleys, making sure passengers had seatbelts fastened. The routine tasks kept her hands busy while her mind spiraled through worst-case scenarios. She'd need to move back home with her parents, default on her student loans, start over in a different industry. 28 years old, and her career was probably over before it began. All because she'd been too scared to stand up to a bully with seniority. The landing was smooth. Textbook. Captain Daniels still knew how to fly a plane, even if he'd forgotten how to treat human beings with dignity. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Passengers began gathering belongings, checking phones, preparing to deplane into their various lives. Most of them would forget this flight within days. It was just another trip, another commute, another Tuesday. For the Bennetts, it was the flight that proved strangers would discriminate against them without hesitation. For Patricia, it was the flight that ended her career. For Rachel, it was the flight that taught her silence had consequences as real as action. For Owen, it was the flight that showed him how his company really worked beneath the corporate diversity statements. For Kenneth Walsh, it was the flight that might bankrupt his airline. For 47,000 viewers and counting, it was the flight that showed a 9-year-old teaching adults about courage. Owen stood near the exit as passengers began deplaning. Dr. Bennett and Zara waited until most of the crowd had cleared, the father moving carefully with his cane, the daughter guiding with practiced ease. As they reached the exit, Zara paused and looked at Owen. "Thank you for the meal, Mr. Mitchell, and for being honest with me." He nodded, not trusting his voice. "I hope your father's surgery goes well." "Me too. He deserves to see clearly again." She helped her father down the jet bridge and into the terminal. Owen watched them disappear into the crowd, just another father and daughter traveling together, invisible again now that they'd left the airplane. Except they weren't invisible anymore. 47,000 people had watched them stand up to discrimination, had heard a 9-year-old say, "You will respect black people," with a moral clarity that shamed everyone who'd been complicit. The video count hit 62,000 as Owen checked his phone. Comments still flooding in. News outlets picking up the story. Hashtags trending. Rachel appeared beside him, pulling her suitcase. "What happens now?" Owen closed his phone. "Now we find out if the system actually changes, or just protects itself better next time." Patricia emerged from crew rest, her face blotchy from crying. She didn't make eye contact with anyone, just grabbed her bag and rushed off the plane like it was on fire. Owen had worked with her for 8 years, had thought she was just old school, set in her ways, a little rough around the edges but basically competent. Had never looked deeper because looking deeper would have required acknowledging problems he didn't want to solve. Captain Daniels exited the cockpit, his silver hair still perfect, his uniform still crisp. He nodded at Owen like this was just another flight, another day, another routine operation. Owen wanted to ask him if he understood what he'd done, if he grasped that his assumptions had real consequences for real people. If 34 years of flying had taught him anything about seeing passengers as human beings instead of problems to manage. But Daniels was already walking away, phone to his ear, probably calling his union rep. The gate area had transformed into chaos. News crews had arrived somehow. Someone must have tipped them off about the viral video. Cameras pointed at passengers as they emerged. Reporters asked questions about discrimination and airline policies. Marcus Williams walked straight to the nearest camera and gave a statement. He identified himself as a commercial pilot, explained what he'd witnessed, confirmed that the video was unedited and complete. He spoke with calm authority about the pattern of discrimination black passengers faced, about the importance of documentation, about a 9-year-old teaching adults about moral courage. His interview was added to the growing news coverage. By the time it aired on local Baltimore stations, the video views had passed 90,000. Owen made his way to the gate desk where a Skybridge supervisor was coordinating with airport security. A small crowd had gathered, journalists, passengers from the flight, people who'd seen the video and come to the airport hoping to witness the aftermath. And standing near the windows overlooking the tarmac, talking on her phone with quiet intensity, was a woman in an expensive business suit who radiated the particular authority of corporate power. Owen recognized her from LinkedIn photos. Sarah Reynolds, executive assistant to the Bennett Aviation Holdings board. She'd flown in from Atlanta on an earlier flight, arriving ahead of the Bennetts to manage the situation. She ended her call and approached Owen directly. "Mr. Mitchell, we need to talk." Sarah Reynolds led Owen to a quiet corner of the terminal, away from cameras and curious passengers. Her heels clicked against polished floors with the rhythm of someone who spent their life moving between crisis meetings. She carried a leather portfolio embossed with Bennett Aviation Holdings logo, a phoenix rising from flames, designed after Dylan Bennett's accident. "Mr. Mitchell, I've reviewed the video. I've spoken with Dr. Bennett, and I've briefed the board on what happened during that flight." Owen braced himself for termination, for lawsuits, for the institutional collapse that comes when you fail someone with the power to destroy you. The board wants a full accounting of how many similar incidents have occurred on Skybridge flights. Not just with your employee, Patricia Crawford. All employees, all flights, going back 5 years. The scope of the request hit like cold water. They weren't just investigating today. They were excavating the entire pattern of discrimination that today's incident had exposed. That will take significant resources to compile. Sarah's expression didn't soften. "Then I suggest you start allocating resources. The board meets in 48 hours. They'll determine at that time whether Bennett Aviation Holdings continues its partnership with Skybridge Airlines or terminates all agreements effective immediately. 48 hours to prove his company wasn't systematically racist. 48 hours to document decades of failures. 48 hours to demonstrate that today was an aberration rather than standard operating procedure." Owen understood with perfect clarity that he was about to spend the next 2 days destroying his own career by revealing truths the company had spent years burying. "I'll have the report ready. One more thing, Mr. Mitchell. Dr. Bennett specifically requested that the junior flight attendant, Rachel Anderson, not face disciplinary action. He said she showed concern and provided excellent service when given the opportunity. The board will honor that request." Relief flooded Owen, unexpected and overwhelming. At least Rachel would survive this. At least one person who tried to do the right thing wouldn't be punished for being powerless. "I'll make sure that's documented." Sarah handed him a business card with her direct number. "If you find evidence of systematic discrimination, I need to know immediately, not in 48 hours, immediately." She walked away toward ground transportation, already on her phone coordinating the next crisis. Owen stood alone in the terminal, watching news crews pack up their equipment, watching viral fame happen in real time to people who'd just wanted to fly to Baltimore. His phone buzzed with an email from Kenneth Walsh. "My office, 6 p.m. Bring everything." Owen checked his watch. 3 hours to compile years of buried complaints into a presentation that would probably cost him his job. He headed for the Skybridge operations office in the terminal, a cramped space filled with filing cabinets and computers that hadn't been updated since 2015. The afternoon supervisor, Tom Green, looked up from scheduling screens. "Owen, what the hell happened on 1247? Corporate is losing their minds. We discriminated against the wrong passenger." Tom's confusion was genuine. There's a right passenger to discriminate against? Owen pulled up a chair and logged into the complaint database. That's exactly the question we need to answer. I need access to all passenger complaints filed in the past 5 years. All of them. Discrimination, service failures, everything. Tom's face went carefully neutral. That's a lot of data. What are you looking for? Patterns. Specifically, patterns of complaints against employees from passengers of color or passengers with disabilities. You're on a fishing expedition. Owen met his eyes directly. I'm on a fact-finding mission ordered by Bennett Aviation Holdings. You want to refuse that request? You call Kenneth Walsh and explain why. Tom turned back to his computer without another word. His fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling data from systems that had been designed to make this kind of analysis difficult. Complaints lived in different databases depending on how they were filed: phone, email, gate agent, flight attendant report. The company had never wanted it to be easy to see the whole picture. That fact alone told Owen what he was going to find. The first data export finished. Owen opened it and started sorting by employee name. Patricia Crawford appeared 47 times in 5 years. Not the 16 formal complaints he'd found earlier, those were just the ones that had escalated to written documentation. These were all complaints, including verbal ones noted in passenger service logs. He read through them chronologically, watching a pattern emerge with sickening clarity. February 2020. Passenger Williams, black male, reported flight attendant Crawford questioned his first-class boarding pass multiple times and suggested he might be more comfortable in economy. June 2020. Passenger Johnson, black female, reported Crawford served her meal last despite being in row 2. Made comment about some people not appreciating fine dining. September 2020. Passenger Martinez, Latino male with wheelchair, reported Crawford didn't offer assistance and muttered about special treatment requests within earshot. On and on. Nearly 50 complaints in 5 years, all from passengers of color or passengers with disabilities, all describing the same microaggressions, the same contemptuous service, the same assumption that they didn't belong in first class. And the company's response to every single complaint? Apologize. Offer flight credits. Close the file. Never investigate, never discipline, never acknowledge the pattern. Owen pulled Patricia's performance reviews. Excellent ratings every year. Commendations for customer service. Bonuses for exceeding satisfaction scores. Because the satisfaction scores only measured passengers who bothered to fill out surveys. And passengers who experienced discrimination often just wanted to forget the experience and move on. Their silence was counted as satisfaction. The system had been designed to protect employees like Patricia and ignore passengers like the Bennetts. Owen's phone rang. Marcus Williams. Mr. Mitchell, I wanted to let you know that my video has been picked up by national news. CNN is running it in their evening coverage. The hashtag #RespectBlackPeople is trending number 3 on Twitter. Owen closed his eyes. National news meant national scrutiny, meant Bennett Aviation Holdings would be making decisions under maximum public pressure, meant no quiet settlements or internal discipline would satisfy the outrage building across social media. I appreciate you letting me know. I also wanted you to know that I've been contacted by 43 other black passengers who've flown Skybridge in the past 3 years. All of them have similar stories. All of them are willing to go on record. Owen's stomach dropped. 43? That's just the ones who saw my video and reached out in the past 4 hours. I expect there will be more. Owen made a decision that would either save his integrity or destroy his career. Would you be willing to compile those testimonies and send them to me? I'm putting together a comprehensive report for Bennett Aviation Holdings. Your evidence would be valuable. Marcus was silent for a moment, calculating whether to trust the system that had failed so many times before. I'll send you what I have. But Mr. Mitchell, those 43 people deserve more than another buried report. They deserve actual change. I understand. He ended the call and added a new section to his analysis. External complaints not filed through official channels. If 43 people had contacted Marcus in 4 hours, how many more had experienced discrimination but never reported it? How many had just stopped flying Skybridge entirely? The economic implications were staggering. lost customers, lost revenue, lost reputation. All because the company had decided that protecting employees like Patricia was more important than serving passengers like the Bennetts. Tom Green appeared with a printout 6 inches thick. 5 years of complaints, sorted by employee, by route, by complaint type. You're going to hate what you find. Owen took the stack and started reading. Tom was right. The patterns were undeniable once you looked. Patricia Crawford wasn't an isolated case. She was just the most egregious example of a company-wide culture. 17 other flight attendants had similar complaint patterns. 5 gate agents, 3 customer service managers, all with excellent performance reviews. All protected by seniority and union rules and a corporate structure that preferred ignorance to accountability. Owen's phone buzzed with an email from Marcus Williams. Subject line, Passenger Testimonies. Attached were 43 written statements, each describing experiences almost identical to what happened to Dr. Bennett and Zara. He started reading and felt his faith in the institution he'd served for 19 years crumble with each paragraph. I was asked 3 times if I was in the right cabin. I had a first-class boarding pass. I'm a surgeon. But I'm black, so apparently I don't look like I belong. Dr. Evelyn Carter, May 2023. They served everyone around me before coming to my row. When I asked about my meal, the flight attendant said, "We're getting to everyone," even though she'd already passed my seat 4 times. Robert Washington, August 2022. I use a wheelchair. They left me in the jetway for 40 minutes because they forgot about me. I missed my connection. They offered me a $50 voucher. Michael Foster, January 2024. My daughter is 7. She asked the flight attendant why everyone was staring at us. The flight attendant said, "Some people aren't used to seeing folks like you in first class." My daughter cried. Amanda Jackson, November 2023. Each testimony was a small violence, a paper cut that bled dignity. Individual incidents that might be explained away as misunderstandings or bad days or personality conflicts. But together they were evidence of systematic failure. Owen compiled everything into a single document. The complaint database, the testimonies, the performance reviews that praised employees while ignoring discrimination patterns, the financial analysis showing lost customers and revenue. The report grew to 237 pages. It was comprehensive, damning, and would probably get him fired. He saved it with the title, Skybridge Airlines Discrimination Analysis, Full Accounting. Then he sent it to Kenneth Walsh with a cover email. "Sir, you asked for thoroughness. This is what thorough looks like." His phone rang 30 seconds later. "Mitchell, are you trying to destroy this company?" "I'm trying to save it. Sir, if we don't acknowledge this pattern and fix it before the board meeting, Bennett will terminate our partnership and we'll be bankrupt within 6 months. The only way forward is complete transparency." Walsh was silent for long enough that Owen thought he'd hung up. "Come to Atlanta, tonight. Bring your report. We're calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning." "Sir, I'm not authorized to attend board meetings." "You are now. 7 a.m. Don't be late." The line went dead. Owen sat in the cramped office, surrounded by years of accumulated failures, and understood that he'd just committed to truth-telling in an institution built on denial. Tom Green watched from his desk. "You just ended your career. You know that, right?" "Probably. But at least I'll be able to sleep at night." Tom laughed without humor. "Sleep is overrated. Unemployment is forever." Owen packed his laptop and headed for the airport. He had 3 hours to catch a flight back to Atlanta, prepare testimony that would indict his own company, and figure out how to advocate for change in a system designed to resist it. The terminal had cleared of news crews, but the video continued spreading. 147,000 views, picked up by CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. Shared by celebrities and activists and ordinary people who recognize their own experiences in that 9-year-old's courage. Somewhere in Baltimore, Dr. James Bennett was checking into Johns Hopkins for pre-surgical preparation. His daughter Zara was probably describing his hospital room, orienting him to the new space, making sure he felt safe before the procedure that might restore his sight. They'd survived today's discrimination, but they shouldn't have had to. That was the truth Owen was going to force his company to face. He boarded his flight, ironically another Skybridge plane, and noticed the careful attention the flight crew paid to every passenger. Word had spread fast through the airline. Everyone knew about the viral video. Everyone knew they were being watched now. Fear was motivating behavior change faster than 20 years of diversity training ever had. Owen settled into his seat and opened his laptop. The report needed an executive summary, something that would capture the board's attention in the first 3 minutes before they started making excuses. He typed, "In the past 5 years, Skybridge Airlines has received 247 discrimination complaints from passengers of color and passengers with disabilities. We have investigated 0 of these complaints seriously. We have disciplined 0 employees for discriminatory behavior. We have lost an estimated 12,000 customers and $47 million in revenue due to our failure to address systematic bias. Today, we discriminated against a man who has the power to bankrupt this company. But the real failure is that we only care because he has power. The 246 other passengers didn't matter to us. That has to change." He read it over, deleted the last sentence, put it back. The board needed to hear truth, even if truth was uncomfortable. The flight to Atlanta was smooth. Owen worked the entire time, refining arguments, anticipating objections, preparing for the institutional resistance that comes when systems are forced to examine themselves honestly. He landed at 9 p.m. and drove straight to Skybridge headquarters. The executive offices were still lit despite the late hour. Kenneth Walsh's assistant met him in the lobby. "Mr. Walsh is in the conference room with legal counsel. They're reviewing your report now." Owen took the elevator to the executive floor. Through glass walls, he could see Walsh and 3 lawyers bent over laptops, their faces grim. One of the lawyers was making notes with the aggressive pen strokes of someone finding liability in every paragraph. Walsh looked up when Owen entered and gestured to a chair. "Your report is very thorough, Mr. Mitchell. Perhaps too thorough." The head lawyer, a woman named Catherine Stone, turned her laptop toward Owen. She'd highlighted sections in red. "This analysis creates significant legal exposure. You've essentially documented systematic civil rights violations going back 5 years. If this report becomes public, we're looking at class action lawsuits from hundreds of passengers." Owen met her eyes directly. "If we don't address these violations before the Bennett board meeting tomorrow, we're looking at bankruptcy. I'll take lawsuits over extinction." Walsh leaned back in his chair. "The board is going to want someone to blame, someone to fire, someone whose termination makes this go away." "You mean me?" Walsh's expression was unreadable. "You're the one who wrote the report that exposes us. You understand how that looks." Owen had expected this, had prepared for it during the flight. "Fire me if you want, but firing the messenger doesn't fix the problem. Bennett Aviation Holdings isn't stupid. They've probably done their own analysis. They know this isn't about one supervisor missing one incident. They know this is systematic." Catherine Stone closed her laptop. "He's right. Bennett's legal team will have compiled the same patterns. Firing Mitchell just makes us look defensive. We need to demonstrate accountability and change." Walsh stood and walked to the windows overlooking the Atlanta skyline. The city lights stretched to the horizon, thousands of travelers moving through the airport below, trusting that airlines would treat them with basic dignity. "Here's what's going to happen," he said finally. "Tomorrow's board meeting, we present this report in full. We acknowledge systematic failures. We announce immediate policy changes. 0 tolerance for discrimination, independent oversight, quarterly audits, real consequences for employees who violate civil rights. And Patricia Crawford? already fired, along with Captain Daniels. And we're putting Linda Stevens and Thomas Green on administrative leave pending investigation into their roles in enabling this culture. Owen felt something shift in his chest. Walsh was actually taking this seriously, actually willing to make changes instead of just managing optics. What about the 43 passengers Marcus Williams identified, the ones who experienced discrimination but never got acknowledgement? Walsh turned back to the room. Catherine, I want a victim compensation fund established. Reach out to every passenger who filed a complaint in the past 5 years. Apologize personally. Offer compensation. Make it right. That could cost millions, she warned. Bankruptcy costs billions. Make it happen. Owen pulled up the financial analysis on his laptop. Sir, there's something else you need to see. I ran projections on what happens if we successfully implement these changes. Walsh waited. Our research shows that airlines with strong anti-discrimination policies and diverse leadership outperform their competitors by an average of 12% in customer retention and 17% in revenue growth. If we actually fix this, if we become the industry leader in passenger rights and dignity, we don't just survive, we thrive. Catherine Stone smiled slightly. You're suggesting we turn a PR disaster into a competitive advantage? I'm suggesting we do the right thing and get rewarded for it instead of punished. Walsh looked at him for a long moment. Mitchell, how would you like to be our new Vice President of Passenger Experience? Effective immediately. Your job is to implement everything in this report. You report directly to me. You have full authority to fire anyone who stands in your way. The offer was so unexpected that Owen couldn't process it at first. He'd expected termination, was being offered promotion instead. Sir, I don't have the qualifications for a VP position. You have integrity, you have analytical skills, and you're willing to tell truth to power even when it costs you. That's more qualified than 90% of executives. Do you want the job or not? Owen thought about Rachel Anderson facing down Patricia Crawford despite being probationary. Thought about Zara Bennett standing up to adults with the moral clarity of someone who understood that silence was complicity. Thought about 43 passengers who'd been ignored and dismissed and told their experiences didn't matter. Thought about the choice between comfort and courage. I want the job, and I want full authority to hire Rachel Anderson as my assistant director. She tried to do the right thing in an impossible situation. She deserves a chance to help build something better. Walsh nodded. Done. Now go get some sleep. Tomorrow we find out if we still have a company. Owen left the executive offices at midnight. The city had quieted, rush hour traffic replaced by the occasional taxi and delivery truck. He drove home through empty streets, his mind already racing through implementation plans, policy changes, training programs, oversight mechanisms, accountability structures, all the institutional machinery needed to transform culture. But culture didn't change through policy alone. It changed through consequences, through visible examples of what happened when you violated the new standards, through making it clear that the old way was gone and wasn't coming back. Patricia Crawford would be the first example, Captain Daniels the second. The message would be clear: discriminate and lose everything. Owen's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Williams. CNN wants me on air tomorrow morning. Anything you want me to say about Skybridge's response? Owen typed carefully. Say that we're taking this seriously, that we're investigating all complaints, that we're implementing real changes, that we understand we have a lot of work to do to earn back trust, and that the passengers who were ignored deserve acknowledgement and compensation. Marcus responded immediately. I'll believe it when I see it, but I'll give you a chance to prove it. That was all Owen could ask for. A chance. An opportunity to demonstrate that institutional change was possible if people with power chose accountability over self-protection. He arrived home to find his wife still awake, watching CNN coverage of the viral video. She turned to him with questions in her eyes. That's your airline. Owen sat down beside her and took her hand. That's my airline. And tomorrow, I either help fix it or lose my job trying. She squeezed his hand.
Then you better help fix it, because I didn't marry someone who stays silent when children are braver than adults.
The next morning, Owen arrived at Skybridge headquarters at 6:30. The boardroom was already set up with presentation screens and coffee service. Kenneth Walsh paced near the windows, reviewing talking points. Catherine Stone organized legal documents into neat folders. At 6:45, the Bennett Aviation Holdings delegation arrived. Sarah Reynolds led them, carrying the same leather portfolio from yesterday. Behind her walked two board members Owen recognized from industry conferences, and a third person he didn't recognize but who radiated the quiet authority of institutional power. Walsh greeted them with professional courtesy and directed everyone to seats around the massive conference table. Owen sat near the head with his laptop ready, his hands steadier than he'd expected. Sarah Reynolds began without preamble. Dr. Bennett is currently in surgery. His daughter Zara is in the waiting room. They're not here because they shouldn't have to relive yesterday's trauma for our benefit. We're here to determine whether Skybridge Airlines deserves to continue its partnership with Bennett Aviation Holdings. Walsh nodded to Owen. Mr. Mitchell has prepared a comprehensive analysis of yesterday's incident and the broader patterns it revealed. I'm going to let him present. Then we can discuss next steps. Owen opened his report and began walking through the findings. He didn't sugarcoat, didn't make excuses, just presented data and testimonies and the undeniable pattern of systematic discrimination. The Bennett board members listened in silence. Sarah Reynolds took notes. Catherine Stone watched their reactions carefully, trying to gauge whether the company would survive the next hour. When Owen finished, the boardroom was quiet for a long moment. Then the board member Owen didn't recognize spoke for the first time. My name is Robert Anderson. I'm the new CEO of Skybridge's regional partner, appointed by Bennett Holdings last night. I'm also a former commercial pilot who lost my license after a crash left me with limited mobility. I've experienced the discrimination you've documented. I've lived it. He turned to Walsh. The question isn't whether this pattern exists. Mr. Mitchell's data makes that undeniable. The question is whether you're willing to do what's necessary to fix it. And that requires more than policy changes. It requires cultural transformation from the top down. Walsh leaned forward. What specifically are you asking for? Robert pulled out his own folder. Bennett Holdings is proposing a joint initiative. We'll keep the partnership intact, but we're requiring the following. Immediate termination of all employees with documented discrimination patterns. Creation of an independent passenger rights office with authority to investigate complaints and discipline employees. Quarterly audits by an outside civil rights firm. Mandatory anti-bias training for all customer-facing staff, including executives. And most importantly, creation of a passenger advisory board that includes people of color and people with disabilities who can provide direct feedback on policies and practices. Walsh looked at Catherine Stone. She nodded slightly. None of it created additional legal liability, and all of it demonstrated good faith effort at reform. We agree to all terms. Robert's expression didn't change. There's one more requirement. We want Rachel Anderson appointed to your new passenger rights office. Dr. Bennett specifically requested it. She was the only employee who showed concern during yesterday's incident. She deserves to be part of the solution. Owen felt relief flood through him. Rachel would have a job, would have a chance to help build something better. Already done, Walsh confirmed. Mr. Mitchell has been promoted to VP of Passenger Experience. Rachel Anderson will be his assistant director. Sarah Reynolds made notes in her portfolio. We'll need written confirmation of all these commitments by end of business today. Our legal team will draft a modified partnership agreement reflecting the new oversight requirements. You'll have it. The meeting continued for another 2 hours, working through implementation details and timelines and accountability measures. Owen's phone buzzed periodically with updates from Marcus Williams. The video had passed 3 million views. #RespectBlackPeople was trending #1 worldwide. Major airlines were being asked by journalists if they had similar discrimination patterns. One incident on one flight had exposed an industry-wide failure. The scrutiny was spreading beyond Skybridge to every airline, every service industry, every institution that had decided some customers mattered more than others. At 10 a.m., Sarah Reynolds received a text. She read it and smiled for the first time that morning. Dr. Bennett's surgery was successful. His vision is already beginning to clear. The boardroom exhaled collectively. One piece of good news in a day full of reckonings. As the meeting adjourned, Robert Anderson pulled Owen aside.
You did good work with that report. Most executives bury evidence. You exposed it. That took courage.
Owen shook his head. A 9-year-old girl stood up to adults who should have known better. That's real courage. I just wrote down what was already happening. Real courage is using power to protect the powerless. You had power to bury this report. You chose exposure instead. Don't minimize that. Owen thought about the 43 testimonies from passengers who'd experienced discrimination.
Thought about the 247 complaints that had been dismissed.
Thought about how many more people had suffered in silence because reporting felt pointless. Thought about power and who got to wield it and what responsibilities came with institutional authority. We have a lot of work to do. Robert headed for the elevator. Then we better get started. Owen returned to his new office, a space that had belonged to the fired regional director until yesterday. He called Rachel Anderson immediately.
Rachel, this is Owen Mitchell. I have a job offer for you if you're interested.
3 hours later, Rachel sat across from him in that same office, her hands shaking slightly as she signed employment papers. I thought I was going to be fired. You almost were. Dr. Bennett saved your job by specifically requesting you be protected. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. I need to thank him. Owen handed her an envelope. His daughter's email address. She'll pass along messages, but right now, focus on this. We're building something new. A passenger rights office that actually investigates complaints and holds people accountable. I need you to help design it. You've seen what happens when the system protects bad employees. Help me build a system that protects passengers instead. Rachel wiped her eyes and straightened in her chair. Where do we start? Owen pulled up the list of 247 dismissed complaints. We start by calling every single person on this list. We apologize. We listen to their stories. We acknowledge that we failed them, and we ask what changes they want to see. That's going to take weeks. Then we better start now. They spent the rest of the day making calls. Some passengers hung up immediately, too angry to engage with the company that had dismissed them. Others listened cautiously, testing whether this apology was genuine or just more corporate damage control. A few shared stories that made Owen and Rachel both cry. Tales of humiliation and trauma that should never have happened. By 5 p.m., they'd reached 34 people. 27 agreed to participate in the new passenger advisory board. 5 just wanted acknowledgement. 2 threatened lawsuits that Catherine Stone would have to manage. All of them deserved better than what they'd received. Owen's phone buzzed with an email from Sarah Reynolds. Subject, update from Johns Hopkins. He opened it to find a message from Zara Bennett. Mr. Mitchell, my daddy can see again. The doctors say it's going to keep getting better. He can see my face now. He cried when he saw me. Thank you for treating us with respect yesterday. And thank you for making sure other people won't have to go through what we did. Your friend, Zara. Owen showed the email to Rachel. She read it and smiled through fresh tears. We don't deserve her gratitude. We should have protected her in the first place. Owen saved the email in a folder he labeled, Why This Matters. Then we spend the rest of our careers making sure no other 9-year-old has to be braver than the adults around her. That's how we earn her gratitude. The video continued spreading. 5 million views, 10 million. Picked up by international news.
analyzed by civil rights experts and business consultants and educators who saw lessons about institutional change and individual courage. Patricia Crawford's name became synonymous with discrimination. Captain Daniels lost his pilot's license after a federal investigation. Victoria Hayes was asked to resign from her country club and found herself uninvited from social events. Their consequences became case studies in what happens when prejudice meets power and loses. But the real story wasn't their punishment. The real story was a 9-year-old girl who said, "You will respect black people," and meant it, who stood up when adults stayed silent, who used her father's power not for personal revenge, but for systemic change. The real story was about how courage doesn't require age or size or institutional authority. It just requires the clarity to name injustice and the strength to resist it. Owen and Rachel worked late into the night, building frameworks and policies and accountability structures. They knew that systemic change took years, knew that one report and one fired employee wouldn't fix decades of institutional bias. But they also knew that every journey started with a single step. And today, finally, they'd taken that step. The airline industry watched. Other companies analyzed Skybridge's response. Some saw cautionary tales about the cost of viral videos. Others saw opportunities to examine their own practices before cameras forced the examination. Change rippled outward from one incident on one flight, touching every corner of an industry that had grown comfortable with inequality. And in Baltimore, Dr. James Bennett held his daughter's hand and saw her face clearly for the first time in 3 years. Saw the strength in her eyes. Saw the courage she'd learned from protecting him. Saw the future she was building where children wouldn't have to fight battles that adults should have already won. "You were very brave yesterday, baby." Zara squeezed his hand. "You taught me to be brave, Daddy. You and Mama both. Your mother would be so proud of you." Zara looked out the hospital window at the city beyond. "I think she was watching. I think she helped me find the right words." James pulled his daughter close, grateful for restored sight and restored hope, and a child who understood that power should protect rather than punish. The surgery was a success, but the real healing, for him, for the airline, for the passengers who'd been dismissed, that healing was just beginning. And it started with a 9-year-old who refused to stay silent when silence was easier.